This episode is brought to you by Heyday. Feeling stressed? Take a moment for yourself with Heyday. Stroll through rows of golden wheat, tend to cute barnyard animals, and discover the joys of a digital farm retreat. You don't have to hop in a car or catch a plane. Escape to the farm at the tap of a finger. With Heyday, you're not just tending to a farm, you're tending to yourself. Heyday. Search Heyday, that's Hay space DAY, in your favorite app store. Heyday is a free-to-play mobile game and offers optional in-app purchases and random rewards.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and today I'm so excited to welcome back my good friend, Amy McElroy. Welcome.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me back again.
I feel like you're just becoming a regular on the show at this point.
I know. I love it.
I love it too. Amy and I feel like have become pretty good friends after doing all of these interviews now, haven't we?
Yeah, we definitely have. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's nice to have other historical people in your corner that you can chat about history and other things with.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You can deal with all my life drama. Well, speaking of drama and life, how's that for a segue? Today, we're going to talk about the topic of a book that Amy is working on currently about Erasmus, right?
Yeah, he's definitely a figure for drama.
I love this because I really don't know anything about him, other than I think he had some type of a relationship with Thomas More. I know that he came to English court and met the royal children, and that is pretty much it as far as my knowledge of him goes. So today I think we're really going to do just the basic. We'll do like Erasmus 101, like for beginners today. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
So to get started, I really want to know what made you decide to do a book on him of all people.
Okay, so it was when I was researching for the first books at Educating the Tudors, and although he was never really a royal tutor, I was intrigued by how much he actually influenced education as a whole and his relationship that he had with Henry VIII. And I just found him to be quite an intriguing figure when I came across him in like his interactions with other people. I just went off looking at him, who he was. I knew the same as you, same as what you've just said, though I knew about his relationship with Thomas More and that he'd met the royal children. And I knew that obviously his books are still published today, but that was largely it. So I didn't really know who he was, where he came from, like what made him this scholar that is still talked about today. So yeah.
And we're just going to just scratch the surface on this today because we want to leave some for your book when that comes out. And it's going to be a little while, right, before that book comes out?
Yeah, it should be out early next year.
Okay, so we got some time. This is our way of teasing you, listeners and viewers, a little bit to get you intrigued with Erasmus so that when Amy's book comes out, you want to snatch it up and fill in all the gaps that we're not able to fill today ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's start at the beginning then to understand where he came from. Where was he born? What did his life look like as a kid?
So his place of birth and even the date of birth, basically anything to do with this man is shrouded in mystery. I don't know why, but he's such a complicated figure. Nobody can agree on anything. So his birth is apparently between 1466 and 1469. I believe it's 1469. There's lots of theories around why his date of birth changed, and it even seems to have changed throughout his life himself, so, or in what other people were writing about him. There's also claims that he was born in Rotterdam. There's claims that he was born in Gouda or Gouda. Not sure how you pronounce that, so I'm sorry if I've just butchered it.
I was just thinking
Um,
cheese. You said Gouda, and I thought cheese immediately. Sorry.
but he himself used of Rotterdam. So I think we can probably infer that he was born in Rotterdam, although there does seem to be a few claims upon him as a national, which obviously nations are proud of, and you can't really blame them. Um, Now, his early family life is also quite complicated. So there's stories about him having a brother who was around 3 years older than him called Peter. Um, but one of the theories about his changing date of birth all relates to his dad. So we do know his dad did become a priest. And according to Erasmus, um, his dad did not become a priest until after he was born.
Hmm.
And the story goes that he had many, many siblings, and because there was so many, it was traditional back then for one to be dedicated to the church. Unfortunately for Erasmus's dad, he was that person. At the time, he was in a relationship with Erasmus's mother, and essentially, because of his family's interference and behavior, he goes off to Italy. Says, I'm not dealing with this. He goes off and he's a scribe, and he's very, very successful as a scribe. Um, his family then write and say, Margaret, your ex now, I suppose, is dead.
Hmm.
So he's very, very upset by that and says, well, that's it. I'm going to take my vows. I'm going to become a priest. So he does that and he comes back home, only to find out that they'd all lied to him. She was alive and Erasmus was also in the picture. So there's obviously a few things that don't really make sense there, because you can probably get it when it comes to Erasmus that he might have gone off and not known she was pregnant, but you knew about your other son who was supposedly 3 years older. So there's little bits that don't really make sense, but they never lived together again. Erasmus writes himself that he believes that vows were spoken, just not in a church type setting. But obviously that didn't make it invalid back then. However, they did successfully, to use a modern term, co-parent. So they both like had input into the boy's education. And because his dad was well educated and successful as a good scribe, I think he saw the value in education. So he was insistent that the boys start school, and so they did. They started school. They then moved to Deventer, where the mum moved with them, so she could be close by while they went to school. Sadly, when he was around 14 years old, his mum did die of plague.
Hmm.
So the boys were recalled back to live with their dad, who then died of plague. So they were left in the care of three guardians. Now, one of these, there are some indications that one of them taught Erasmus in his first ever school. There's also a reference somewhere that he was their uncle, but I can't find anything that actually confirms that. He was kind of the lead guardian, so his name was Peter Winkle. Now, according to Erasmus, his dad left behind a healthy estate. They essentially blew it. So they were pushed to go to a monastic school, which Erasmus didn't object to that. It was a school he really valued his education even as a youngster. What he did object to was when his formal education came to an end, they wanted him to go into a monastery. And he said, no, I want to go to uni. And they said, well, there's no money, so tough. Now, because he'd technically been declared illegitimate as the child of a priest, he had no standing. He had no money left. His guardians had spent it all. Because he was illegitimate, it was kind of frowned upon. To be the son of a illegitimate son of a priest was even worse.
Mm.
So he literally had no option other than enter a monastery, which he did. And I think at first he kind of fought against it, but he actually came round because they gave him quite a bit of leeway. He was allowed to miss some of the services. Um, he was allowed to go to the library whenever he wanted. Like there was limits on what they could do when they could do it. None of it really applied to him. He essentially did what he wanted to do,
Huh.
and all he did was study and help his friends study. So his early life, I think, started off good, but with the loss of his parents, yeah, I think that's when it fell apart for him and the spending of whatever estate there was. We don't know how big that was, but his father's family weren't poor. So they weren't obviously rich, but they did have properties and things like that. So, and obviously his dad was one of many sons. So there's nothing to say that he would have inherited a vast amount, but he earned his own money. So the boys definitely had some form of inheritance come in. It just happens that the Guardians blew it for them. So
Mm.
sadly for Erasmus.
Do you have any idea why he was allowed such freedoms? Like, why could he study when he wanted to instead of doing all the other things he should have been doing?
I think personally it's because when they enter the monastery, they have a period of time where they have to settle in before they decide if they want to take their vows. So it's the novice period of their career. And obviously they want him to take vows. So I think they kind of gave him a bit of leeway. And there was others there that saw in him, like this guy, like, he loves his education. So I think they knew if we let him study and things like that, one, it'll benefit us because monks at the time would often give lessons to other people or teach in schools, and they were part of many, many schools back then. So I think they saw the benefit in having somebody that was so intent on studying, but at the same time, it also influenced him to take his vows. There are reports that he did have fevers and things, so I think the food and the diet as well was relaxed for him. So he wasn't always ordered to fast. He could actually eat sometimes because of his health. So I think there's a mixture of them wanting him to stay and take his vows and the fact that, we can't force somebody to fast who's got health conditions.
Yeah.
So I think it is a bit of a mixture of things.
Okay. Did he take his vows?
He did.
What?
Yes.
I wasn't
So
expecting that.
I think he felt that he had very, very little choice because even when his novice period was up, he still had no money. His ultimate goal was he wanted to go to Paris and he wanted to go to uni. You can't get there with no money.
Mm.
So I think for him, he saw it as if I take my vows, yes, I'm stuck, but it's the only chance I've got to study because the monasteries do have brilliant libraries. So I think he kind of saw it as the best of the circumstances that he was under at the time.
Oh, okay. Now this opens up just a whole load of questions. I did not expect you to say that he took his vows. I don't know how I didn't know this about him, but admittedly, I don't know very much. So he takes his vows. I don't even know, like, how does his life look, and how does he become this Renaissance man that like? How do you go from the monastery to Renaissance? Like, I can't connect the two. Help me connect the two, Amy.
So he as we've mentioned, there were people that noticed his scholarly pursuits, shall we say. So even though he had took his vows, people realized that, he wasn't very happy. Um, and there was a Henry of Bergen, so Bishop of Cambrai. He was actually at the time wanting his cardinal hat. So obviously the plan is head to Rome, blah blah, impress everybody. But to do that, you need a very good Latin secretary. And somebody put Erasmus's name forward because they'd seen his Latin writing. It was very, very impressive. He didn't write in the Latin that was very commonly used at the time. He wrote in the old style Latin, so ancient Latin, which is apparently way more elegant. So that's what he wrote in. So obviously for the bishop, it was, oh, okay. And obviously, if a bishop asks, can I take this person out of the monastery to into my household? They're not going to say no, are they? Because he's then in a way becoming a patron of the monastery. So that's how he got out.
Wow.
But he did leave. He left in the service of Henry of Bergen. Um, 2 years later, he was actually ordained as a priest. So he still continued with the religious aspect, but I think by that point he was very pious. So there's no taking that away from him. But I think he saw it also as a way that he could still continue to do what he was doing, but he was also out of the monastery at that point. So it was kind of the best of both worlds for him that I'm out of the monastery, but I'm technically not obliged to pay my own way because I've now got a patron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. So I just realized too, I feel like I was judging Erasmus for this whole taking his vows and being a Renaissance man. But really, when you look at it, Thomas More was considered a Renaissance man and he was very pious too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you can't be a Renaissance man and be pious at the same time. I feel like sometimes I get these preconceived notions in my head and I have to talk to guests like you to break those wide open and go, no, 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 no. You need to look at this in a totally different way and realize this is just how it was.
Yeah. And I think with Erasmus, he is kind of like the exception to the rule because once he left, other than visits, he didn't go back to that monastery. He did go back and visit him, but and he had a lifelong obligation to that monastery, but he never went back. So I don't think there's many others that would have got away with that. He seemed to have got away with it for various reasons. Um, but yeah, I don't think he's the norm, so to speak, of technically somebody that's taken vows that is off living his best life. So,
Yeah. So at what point then in his life does he become the man that we know during the Tudor dynasty?
um, so he is in the service of Henry of Bergen for uh 18 months to 2 years. By that point, Henry of Bergen had given up on the idea of his cardinal hat. So Erasmus did perform his duties for him as a secretary, but he didn't get to go to Rome, which was a disappointment for him. And it was suggested to him by a somebody who would become a very good friend of Erasmus that why don't you let him go to uni? So Henry of Bergen surprisingly agreed that he could go off to Paris, he could go to uni, and he would be his patron.
Hmm.
So off he goes. He enrolls at a college that's part of the University of Paris. It was one that was predominantly enrolled by poorer students. But for Erasmus, that was a dream come true. Like finally got to go to uni and somebody else is paying for it. Now, to be fair, when he got there, he fell swiftly out of this illusion that uni was going to be brilliant. The tutors, according to him, were boring. He didn't like the lectures. So again, he did what he wanted to do. He would go to the lectures that he wanted. He would study on his own. And unfortunately, Henry of Bergen, despite all the promises, rarely sent money for him. So he took up teaching other students himself, some of which were English. So we know he took on Mountjoy. So Mountjoy at the time came over to finish his studies. And he employed Erasmus as a personal tutor. Now, that relationship became a very, very good friendship. And when he left, he invited Erasmus back to England. And that was his first trip to England, where he met Thomas More, he met the royal children, he made friends left, right, and centre. And that was really the beginning of his time as a scholar that was becoming known in Renaissance circles, so to speak.
Yeah. What year was that again that he came to England and met the royal family?
It was 1499 that he was
Okay.
over for the first time. So that's when he went for a walk with Erasmus and Mountjoy. They went to Eltham, which was the royal nursery. And Thomas More had produced a piece of writing for Henry. Obviously, he's the prince. He's seen as the head of that household, so to speak. And Erasmus was quite annoyed because he didn't know they were going there. He didn't know that he was meeting royal children. He hadn't prepared anything. And Henry, being a young Henry, challenged him and said, I can't believe you didn't write anything. Like bypassing a note across the dinner table. And for Erasmus, that was, it was horrible. Like, you don't want to be put in a situation where you've got a prince challenging you that you've come to visit and you haven't brought anything. So anyway, he goes away and writes this poem and dedicates it to Henry. And yes, that was the start of their relationship. But he also obviously became close friends with Thomas More, so that didn't come between their friendship. But he also met people like Colet, who was the Dean of St. Paul's, who would become the Dean of St. Paul's. So he did form some very good relationships on that first trip to England, which some of them went right the way through for the rest of his life.
Wow. Wow. Oh, so you made sure to say his first trip to England. So how many trips did he make?
Uh, there was I think it was 3 or 4 major trips where he stayed for months.
Okay.
And then there's a couple where he seems to have only been there for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I
And
think he did seem to enjoy his time in England from what he wrote about his experience.
and he clearly could speak the language.
Well, he never actually says that he can speak English, and it could be that because of the people that he's mixing with that he didn't need to because they all spoke Latin.
Oh, okay.
So he never says it, but I would imagine that he probably could pick up bits. I can't see him never picking up little bits of it, even if it was just to get by.
Okay. And the poem that he wrote, Henry, was that in Latin?
Yes.
And Henry could have read that because he was
Yeah.
kind of young at that time too, wasn't he, Henry?
Yeah. But yes, he could have read it. Um, and it was obviously printed a little while later, so it wasn't just Henry that got to see it. Whoever wanted to own a copy got to see it. So I think if you're English, you're going to want to buy a copy of a poem that's dedicated to your prints, aren't you? So
Yeah.
I don't think Erasmus was very stupid in having that printed. I think he saw it as a way to increase his name. So yeah, can't
He
blame
does
him.
he does sound like a very intelligent man who just wanted to continue to educate himself, and he found his way through the church to get to where he wanted to be.
Yeah, definitely. So when he'd return to England and he'd go to Cambridge, for instance, he would stay in the accommodation that was dedicated to the Augustinian friary. So that was part of his um that's where he took his vows. So he did use his vows in some instances to his advantage. Um, whereas on other occasions he would absolutely be completely negative about monasteries in that, well, not completely, but he was quick to point out their faults. So yes, I think he used what he could to his advantage when he could.
Right. A free room and board, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but help me understand when somebody takes their vows, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a priest. It just means they're part of the church.
So he took his vows to become an Augustinian friar, essentially.
Okay.
Um, but he was obviously then ordained as a secular priest. So both sets of vows stand. The thing with Erasmus is because he was also deemed illegitimate, he was banned from holding any kind of church office. He was banned from owning any property, earning any kind of income, but he managed to get a dispensation that basically took that away. So it was declared you can have offices, you can own property, you can get your own income. So even the popes were on his side, largely. Um, they also gave him a dispensation to not wear his monastic habit. So to be fair to him, that was because he was attacked. People mistook his habit for the outfit of plague doctor. So
Oh,
they almost stoned him. Um, so he wrote then to the Pope to say, this is what's happened, and he was given permission to not wear it. He did choose to still wear the clothing of a secular priest for the rest of his life. So I think that does show that, yes, he wasn't always favourable towards monasteries, but towards his religion, he definitely was.
hmm. So, for those of us, again, who don't know who he was and don't know very much about him, why do we consider him such a Renaissance man?
Oh,
Vitamin Water was born in New York because New Yorkers wanted more. Like more flavor to go with all the flavor. A refreshing drink after climbing 6 flights of stairs to a walk-up apartment or standing in the subway station in 100-degree heat. Focus when I have an 8-hour shift. And Triple X after I was out all night at a club called Triple X. Drink vitamin water. It's from New York.
McCrispy strips are now at McDonald's. I hope you're ready for the most dippable chicken in McDonald's history. Dip it in all the sauces. Dip it in that hot sauce in your bag. Dip it in your McFlurry. Your dip is your business. McCrispy strips at McDonald's.
part of it will be the amount of books that he actually wrote. So I didn't realize when I started this just how much he'd written and had published. Like, it's absolutely insane how much work he actually did. And there's records that, he would work day and night. As long as he was studying, he was happy.
Hmm.
Um, But I think the main thing is his influence on education as a whole. He was very much um he took the humanist approach. So education should be enjoyable. We shouldn't be using corporal punishment for children in schools. Girls deserve an education. So he was quite forward thinking, which was unusual back then. But he was also forward in what he published. So the Renaissance was turning back towards the ancient writers of Greece and Rome. And the church didn't like that because they believed that people should stick to what was around them. So, for instance, the Bible, the scriptures. Erasmus's point of view was the New Testament, for instance, has been transcribed that many times since it was written that there's bound to be errors in there. There's bound to be. And the only way that you can fix them is to go back. So that's what he did. And he found that it was full of errors, which, yeah, he was right.
Isn't that we do the same thing now, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the church didn't like, well, some of the church didn't like it. He did find favour with a lot of people within the church who were grateful that he was doing that because it meant that they would get a correct version of the New Testament. Others were very much, why are you playing with that? Like it's the New Testament, like absolutely not. So yeah, he did face a lot of criticism, but he stormed ahead and he would translate the works of ancient authors. So whether they were Greek, he would translate them into Latin, Latin into Greek. Greek was obviously becoming more and more popular, so he taught himself. He couldn't afford a tutor, so he did it himself. And his opinion of that was, I don't believe that you can study the scriptures without understanding Greek. So he was very intent on going back to the beginning, and I think it scared a lot of people. And then ultimately, his many, many writings by accident, I would definitely say by accident, possibly lit the match of the Reformation. So
Really?
yeah, I definitely do not think he did it. Well, he definitely did not do it on purpose, but yeah, I don't think he realized that some of his writings would influence others or be interpreted by others into then making the decisions that they did, i.e. Luther. So
Yeah, I was just going to ask about Luther too and say, were they aware of each other? Did Erasmus
yeah.
know? Oh, he did.
So Luther at the beginning was very much an admirer of Erasmus. So he would write to him, calling him brother and all of this stuff. And technically they were brothers because they were both in monasteries, but he was very, very friendly towards him and he was very encouraging of what he was doing. But Luther was younger. So he was actually studying Erasmus himself. And I think as Luther got older, he started to go back himself. And where Erasmus saw that change was needed in the church, what he meant was things like, at the time, the Catholic Church sold indulgences. Indulgences were a way of limiting time in purgatory. He didn't believe that you should be able to buy them, which, to be fair, yeah, why should you be able to buy your way out of purgatory? And that's what he believed. He didn't believe in it at all. He said, no, like, it's just a way for the church to make money. I don't agree with it. There was other things like them beating children and their views on education, things like that, that he did not agree with. And he thought that there did need to be reform, but as a whole, he was a Catholic at heart. Luther took things a bit further and essentially said, I think it was all but two of the sacraments that real. So he went one extreme to the other. And that's when their arguments, if you want to put it lightly, began. Now, Erasmus at first did not do anything, so he ignored it. He ignored it when he pinned his thesis to the door of the church. He ignored it when Luther was calling him out, saying Erasmus knows nothing, he's too old. He did turn quite nasty towards Erasmus. And other people were encouraging Erasmus to speak out, to say, if anyone can put him in his place, it's you. Because there was calls from both sides. You've got the Lutherans saying he's completely right. You've got the church absolutely horrified by what's happening. And then you've got some people calling for him to be burned alive and all of that. So obviously it's heresy. And Erasmus, I think, felt quite stuck because the main principle of it was reform of the church. And I think he felt a bit torn because they both wanted reform, just not the same extent at all. And obviously Erasmus put it off, he put it off, and then the time came when he did actually speak out. So he did, before that, write to the Pope to say, here's my advice. And he did offer to write something in secret as well. But ultimately, he chose to publish something that essentially called out everything that Luther was doing, but it was based around a certain subject, which was free will. Luther publicly responded. It did take him a year to write his response, but
That's a long time.
Anybody's a fan of Luther, I apologise. I am a bit biased. But he did publish it, and Erasmus essentially says, your response is just full of insults.
Mhm.
You haven't answered anything. You've just wrote a response that just insults me. So he published that as a response. Obviously in a lot more elegant and, scholarly way, but that's the crux of what he says to him. And that's where it blows up with anything that Erasmus publishes. You've got Luther saying, I'd never even let children read it. You've got him calling Erasmus a coward and things like that. And the Reformation spreads. And at that point, Erasmus is kind of seen as you need to do something. Like, everybody knows who you are. Everybody listens to you. By staying quiet, you're not helping. But I think he kind of felt like, I can't speak out because at the time, wherever he was, people were being burned. Churches were being sacked. He was like, I'm not putting my life in danger. So he would move around to where he felt safer. But yes, I think he kind of became the crux of somebody's got to do something. And you could probably argue that he left it a bit too late, because by the time he did do it, the favour towards Luther had spread massively throughout Europe. So I don't know. You could say what would have happened if he'd have spoke out sooner. But ultimately, I think he tried to tread carefully. He obviously doesn't want to upset the church himself.
Right.
And he writes himself that I'm torn. Like, I've got Lutherans calling me whatever, and I've got the Catholic Church calling me Lutheran. So he ended up being seen as the bad guy on both sides, sadly for him.
Wow. Okay, so at the beginning you said that he was born around the 1560s, right?
1460s.
Oh, yeah, 1460s. That's what I meant. Thank you for correcting me. Okay, so he was born around the 1460s. Luther wrote his thesis, that was in like the 1520s, right?
Yeah.
How long did Erasmus live?
He actually died in 1536. So
Oh,
yes, he
so
was
he saw. Oh
old.
my gosh. Okay, good. Then I can ask you my next question because then he would have witnessed, so to speak, the
Yeah,
Reformation in England.
yeah. So he witnessed the great matter between Henry VIII and Catherine. And I think one of the things that I do admire about him is he never voiced an opinion on that. And I think it's because he adored Catherine, but he also knew if I speak out, I can no longer go back to England. He had to keep Henry on side. So I think he ultimately made the decision of him staying quiet. And I know he was asked about it, and he essentially said, in my opinion, the Queen loves the King and he loves her. That's all he said. So yeah, I think he stayed well away from that subject, but he definitely saw it all unfolding. He
Yeah.
obviously saw his friends, Thomas More and Bishop Fisher. Yeah, he lived through all of that. So, and you can tell by his writing that he felt it. So, towards the end of his life, he is saying, like, I'm feeling lonely, like, my friends are gone, and things like that. So, yeah, he was very, very old. He lived through a lot,
Yeah, I mean, if he was born in the 1460s and lived until 1536, he was at close 60s, 70s.
which is very old for
Yeah.
them. Not
Yeah.
not so much now, but very for that time period. Yeah.
Very, very old. Okay, well, I really enjoyed this. So, to wrap this up, I want to know what you think Erasmus's biggest impact on history was.
Oh, I think I'd have to actually say accidentally causing the Reformation, because I do think if he hadn't have been such a prominent scholar, others wouldn't have then gone off and done their own things. Like obviously I could be wrong and there's a possibility that they would do. But I think because he was writing and publishing so much, it gave easy access to people to the ancient writers that were not really around. So he spent a lot of time digging through monastery libraries to find original manuscripts and then he'd translate them and publish them. So he gave a lot of literature. Obviously, a lot of it wasn't his own, it was literally him either transcribing or translating something and publishing it. But I think the literature that he gave probably was at least a spark towards the Reformation. So I think, yeah, but on the grand scheme of it, I think he's a very complex person. But he's also absolutely fascinating, and his loyalty to his friends is admirable, even though he can come across as a bit of a mooch sometimes. Yeah, he's very loyal.
He learned how to work the system. You can't hold that against him.
No, definitely not. He did, yes.
Well, Amy, this is now your opportunity to plug all of your books and then talk about where you're at with this Erasmus book as well.
Okay, so my I've published three books so far. So Educating the Tudors, Women's Lives in the Tudor Era, and earlier this year, Mary Tudor, Queen of France. They're available in all the usual places. Um, Erasmus is now complete and submitted. So yay. Well, the first draft is, there's obviously editing and things, but that will be out early next year. And I'm now researching my next one, which is Teaching the Tudors, which is a focus on the actual tutors, so who they were, that humanist circle that existed in England during the Tudor period, so around Oxford, Cambridge, and how they're all linked.
Oh, it seems like it'll go well with educating the tutors then.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
love
that's what
that.
made me want to do it. So I found I was quite interested in they are all linked. So there's if you look at them all, there's like a little circle. So one of them taught the other one, and then the other one, and yeah. So
I love it. I love it. Amy McElroy, thank you so much for being on the show with me again today.
oh no, my pleasure. Anytime.
And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.